So this chapter is Chapter 8, Stratification and Social Mobility in the United States. So it deals with, basically it describes the various systems of stratification as well as how the various perspectives view and interpret stratification. You're going to read about wealth and how it's distributed in the United States, as well as various explanations of poverty and who is mostly affected by it. You'll also read about the relationship between stratification and life chances and the social factors that impact social mobility, which refers to the individual's or the group's movement between social strata. So we're already familiar with these terms, ascribed status and achieved status, but we're going to give them some context as they relate to social stratification. Remember that ascribed status is the social position assigned to a person by society without regard to the person's unique talents or characteristics. Achieved status refers to the social position that a person attains through his or her efforts, such as being a college graduate. Social inequality occurs when members of a society have different amounts of wealth, prestige, and power. Sometimes it's referred to as the 3 Ps: property, power, and prestige. These three tend to occur together. For example, wealth facilitates the acquisition of property, power, influence, and often prestige. So it goes without saying that we have a great deal of social inequality in the United States based on this definition. So there are 4 forms of stratification: slavery, castes, estates, and social classes, which are all defined here. In the U.S., slavery was an ascribed status where racial and legal barriers prevented freedom. India has a 4-tier caste system where there is relative inequality within each caste, but mobility between castes is not possible. So a class system is a social ranking based primarily on economic position in which achieved characteristics can influence social mobility. For example, a class system allows college graduates to obtain higher paying jobs that can increase wealth, status, and power, at least in theory. On the other hand, someone who lacks an education will find it much more difficult to move into a higher social strata. Rothschild divided social classes into 5 categories: upper class, upper middle class, lower middle class, working class, and lower class. The lines between these classes are not as distinct as they are between castes, but members of these classes differ significantly in terms of not only income, but also power and influence. Conflict theorists believe that the wealthy use their power to protect their interests. While many don't hold political office, they have the resources to influence policy in a way that protects their status. Rothschild classified about 1 to 2% of Americans as upper class, which is limited to the very wealthy. This group can increase their wealth significantly via capital gains, which is currently taxed at a lower rate than income, although that may change. For the most part, working class families, poor families, investing is just not possible, as they're just about making ends meet as it is. So they can't take advantage of these capital gains tax discounts. The text points out that we're heading toward a society with bipolar income distribution, where there's 2 classes, the rich and poor, and that we're becoming a nation of haves and have-nots. More and more jobs require specialized technical skills, so opportunities for those who lack an education are just disappearing. Globalization and technological advances, a growing dependence on a temporary workforce, and a rise of new growth industries and non-union workplaces are also factors that contribute to a shrinking middle class. These are discussed on page 217. So Karl Marx, who championed the plight of the working class and poor, believed that the class structure is a determinant of social, economic, and political inequality. He blamed capitalism for creating a system of inequality where the means of production is held largely in private hands. The major incentive is to accumulate profits, he said. The bourgeoisie refers to the segment that owns the means of production, while the proletariat is the working class. Marx believed that the bourgeoisie exploits the working class in its quest to maximize profits. Marx predicted that this exploitation will be the downfall of capitalism because workers will revolt. He helped the proletariat see their common interests and empower them to take collective political action. You can read about this on page 218. So Max Weber disagreed with Karl Marx. He identified three distinct components of stratification: class, status group, and power, which are defined here. Each of these influences the other. It's much easier to achieve wealth and power when you come from an affluent, powerful family because access to the exclusive clubs and institutions has already been established. So how common is social stratification? Apparently it's very common because virtually all societies have some form of inequality. People are sorted into ranks based on a number of factors, including ascribed statuses like race and ethnicity, as well as achieved statuses like occupation and skill level. So as you might guess, functionalists and conflict theorists have very different views on how to explain inequality. Functionalists, as it states here, believe that stratification is necessary so people will be motivated to fill important positions. And they believe that a system of rewards and punishments is necessary for society to run efficiently. This week's discussion question actually deals with this notion. Critics say that this perspective does not fully explain the wide disparity between the rich and poor. You can read more about this on page 220. Conflict theorists believe that we are prone to conflict because resources are scarce. So we are always jockeying to secure more resources, which can take the form of money, material goods, wealth, power, and so on. Karl Marx championed the view that stratification is a major source of societal tension, which leads to instability and social change. All we need to do is turn on the TV to watch the Occupy Wall Street protests that are taking place across the country, in fact, all over the globe. To see that economic inequality is rampant. The dominant ideology refers to the notion that the rich and powerful not only maintain powerful social, economic, and political interests, but they also control the means to control what we think through manipulating religion, education, and the media. Module 27 helps us understand exactly who is affected most by stratification and the extent and effects of stratification. Researchers assign individuals to social classes on the basis of criteria such as occupation, education, income, and residence. Occupations are ranked by level of prestige, and these rankings are commonly used for class position. Prestige refers to the respect and admiration that an occupation holds in our society. A physician, for example, a lawyer, an astronaut, these are considered to be prestigious occupations in our society because we place a high value on what these occupations represent. Esteem refers to the reputation a person has earned within an occupation. So a person can carry a high status based on his or her occupation, but have a low esteem if that person has a terrible reputation. I think we can all agree that income and wealth are distributed unevenly in the United States. Whether this is fair or not has been fiercely debated from the beginning. This is not a new conversation. The text points out that tax policies favor the rich, particularly in the decade from 2001 to 2010, when federal tax policies favor the more affluent. This has occurred while wages for the lower class have fallen. In 2009, as it says here, the wealth of the top 1% exceeds the collective wealth of the bottom 90%. The author provides more statistics on page 225. Module 28 deals with the issue of poverty, which is rarely discussed in politics these days, it seems, but it really is at the root of most social problems. Poverty is defined as the state in which income is insufficient to provide basic necessities such as food, shelter, medical care, and clothing. Absolute poverty refers to the minimum level of sustenance that no family should live below. It means that the insufficiency is so severe that it's life-threatening. Relative poverty is a floating standard by which people at the bottom of a society are judged, as well as being disadvantaged in comparison to the nation as a whole. Due to programs like Social Security and Medicare for the elderly, poverty is not nearly as bad as it was in the 1930s, but it still is a major problem that causes many other problems. In terms of sheer quantity, families in the U.S. that are headed by a mother and father are the least likely to be poor, while those headed by a single mother are the most likely to be poor. There are a few reasons for this. Women don't earn the same level of income as men for the same work. Currently, they earn about 72% or 72 cents on a dollar of what men earn. Second, women are hurt more by a departing husband through divorce, if he becomes disabled, or if he dies. Other reasons include difficulty in finding affordable child care and sexual harassment in the workplace. The underclass refers to the lowest on the socioeconomic ladder. These are the people who completely lack training and skills. They typically do the menial work, low-paying temporary work with no benefits. Their basic needs are often met through welfare, food pantries, and homeless shelters. About 4% of the population falls into this category. If we didn't have programs like Social Security and Medicare, this figure would spiral upwards, as we would see many more elderly living in despair. As a society, we feel it's important to protect the elderly from poverty by contributing to a pool of funds that provides a modest income in later years when we're vulnerable. We also pay to provide the elderly with medical care. I'm speaking, of course, about Social Security and Medicare, which are both socialist programs, which is a dirty word these days in politics. But, we decided collectively that these services are needed, as families just don't have the resources to provide the level of needed support. People are inclined to think of the poor as a static class of people, but many people move in and out of poverty depending on the circumstances, such as losing a job or being diagnosed with a serious illness. High unemployment has driven many people who once enjoyed a good-paying job are now taking part-time temporary work with no benefits and earning far less than they used to. Sociologist Herbert Gans, a functionalist, believed that the poor serve social, economic, and political functions for the non-poor. For instance, he said that the poor underclass tends to perform the dirty and dangerous jobs at a low cost. The poor also create jobs for those who care for them. The mainstream values are defined and reinforced by the poor. Poverty reinforces the higher status of the wealthy, as the poor are blamed for their circumstances. The poor don't have the resources to fight the system, so they do what they can do, like go out into the streets and complain, such as what has been said about the Occupy Wall Street movement. This is discussed on page 230. Social mobility refers to the movement of individuals or groups from one position in society's stratification system to another. It's possible to move into a higher strata, but it's also possible, and more likely these days, to move into a lower strata. The open system kind of epitomizes the capitalist society. The idea that if you work hard enough and achieve, you will climb the social hierarchy. So the mobility is based purely on achieved status. A closed system allows for no or little possibility of moving up. Slavery and caste systems, for example, are examples of a closed system. In these circumstances, social placement is based solely on ascribed status, such as race or family background. You'll also read about horizontal, vertical, intergenerational, intragenerational, and occupational mobility on pages 231 and 232, which refer to the various ways that people can change status. Sociologists tend to focus on vertical mobility, which involves a single person changing rank up or down the social hierarchy. Race, gender, and education level impact the likelihood of moving up or down, moving into a higher status. As bad as the economy is right now, you will graduate with a degree, hopefully soon, that is essentially an admission ticket to a better life. You'll have more control of your life, and you'll be significantly less likely to be poor than someone who just has a high school diploma, and dramatically more than someone who does not have a high school diploma. And if you pursue further education, which I hope you do, you'll further decrease your chances of being poor, and you'll have more control of your life. So that's about it for Chapter 8. I hope this helps you out, and I'll be talking with you soon.